Good morning. Thank you very much for your participation in today's press conference. I'm very happy to be with you. And in today's press conference, I'd like to draw your attention to the development of situation on the Korean Peninsula, and would like to clarify the position of the DPRK. As you know, there has been a positive move on the Korean Peninsula. Last February, between the North and South of Korea, high-level talks was held successfully, and it was followed by separate family reunion gathering in the Korean Peninsula. This move, although it was the minor first step, but it is significant in the meaning that it gave rise to great pleasure to the entire Korean nation, and it gave rise to greater expectation of the entire Korean nation towards wide open dialogue, easing of tension, and relaxation, reconciliation, and unification of the country. With regard to the positive move, the international community expressed welcome, sharing the pleasure with the Korean nation at its own pleasure and success. But on the other hand, regrettably, only the United States did not share this pleasure and did not respect this positive move, but rather it did not hesitate to move into provocating the DPRK by opening the gunfire of joint military drills on the Korean Peninsula. And at the same time, the United States is hell-bent on widespreading the so-called provocation and threats of somebody else in order to escape from the responsibility for the aggravated and increased tension on the Korean Peninsula. And furthermore, it is stepping into expanding new hostile policy against the DPRK. In this regard, first, I'd like to introduce the generous and strenuous efforts of the DPRK government towards easing of the tension on the Korean Peninsula, North-South relations improvement, and towards security and peace of our nation. Coming into the new year 2014, our supreme leadership in the New Year address made a warm appeal on improving the North-South relations, make historic new turning point towards the reunification of the country, and towards securing and safeguarding security and peace of our nation. Upholding the supreme leadership warm appeal, the National Defense Commission immediately advanced 3-point crucial proposals to the South Korean authorities, and it was soon followed by another sending of open letter to South Korean authorities, to all political parties and social organizations of South Korea. Coming into February, the DPRK did not hesitate to accept the request from South Korean authorities on holding the separate family reunion, although in view of the harsh winter condition and the political environment, it was not mature yet. But one thing to remind again is that before that, the DPRK side, in the crucial point, clarified first and foremost as one of the proposals the question of creating favorable climate for improving the North-South relations. And it took first a step towards stopping full-scale surrendering the other side. So it was one of the very important proposals made. And it was also in the crucial proposal clarified the issue of making full stop to all military hostile activities against the other. As clarified in the proposal, the DPRK went ahead, making stop of our military acts, which can be interpreted as provocation and threats by the other side, in particular in the area of a full length across the military demarcation line, including the 5 islands of hotspots in the West Sea of the Korean Peninsula. And all these activities are just representative examples which the DPRK has taken, and these steps are in good reflection of the genuine position and unchanged position of the DPRK government towards having dialogue between the North and South of Korea, bring about reconciliation and national unity and national unification of the country. Second, I'd like to brief the reaction from United States towards the crucial proposals advanced by the DPRK. As soon as these crucial proposals was advanced, the United States went into escalating provocation against the DPRK and intentionally increased and aggravated tension on the Korean Peninsula. Totally rejecting the crucial proposals advanced in January, the U.S. openly stated that there will be no change in their policy towards the DPRK. And the planned joint military drill will not be altered. At the very moment when the representatives of the North and South of Korea were sitting together at the table of dialogue to discuss the issue of separate family reunion, which we boldly accepted the request, the U.S. made another provocation at that time by flying over into South Korea, the nuclear weapon carrying B-52 strategic bombers, thereby creating another nuclear blackmail against our nation and undermining the climate of change towards relaxation. At the very moment when the separate families were sitting together in the Mount Gumgangsan, which is a very beautiful mountain of Korean Peninsula, in our side, and it is called the Diamond Mountain. And they were sharing the pleasure of reunion of blood relatives and family members. But the U.S. again did not hesitate to enter into provocative military drills against the DPRK without any show of respect for this move, and again pouring cold water on the move towards easing of tension and reconciliation. The United States is now moving massive weapons of mass destruction, establishing in a phased manner into South Korea under pretext of the military drills. The weapons like nuclear weapon carrying nuclear-powered submarines, Tomahawk cruise missile carrying destroyers, and the latest version of destroyers armed with latest, most sophisticated Aegis systems, thereby making another serious and dangerous threat towards the security of the Korean Peninsula and peace and security of the region as a whole. As regards the hostile policy of the United States towards the DPRK, it is in essence aimed at bringing down the ideology and social system of the DPRK and swallowing the entire territory of the Korean Peninsula. And the so-called nuclear issue clamors and human rights conspiracies widely being conducted by US are deeply rooted in this hostile policy against the DPRK. Recently, the US Secretary of State, Kerry, made evil remarks naming the DPRK as country of evils and making further awkward remarks, reckless remarks that diplomacy should be made possible with pressure and sanctions so that DPRK kneels down before it. Furthermore, the former president of United States, Bush, came to South Korea, Seoul, met with so-called North Korean defectors, which are criminals who ran away after making crimes in the DPRK, and praised as heroes and made remarks in front of them. DPRK system should not be allowed to go on as it is at the moment. Concerning all these remarks, recently the DPRK latest steps in response. Therefore, the last part, the third, I'd like to introduce the latest steps being taken by the DPRK in response to the grave situation which is intentionally being driven by the United States. On March the 14th, last week, again, the National Defense Commission of the DPRK made a statement in response to the behavior of the United States, who is driving the situation on the Korean Peninsula to the destructive stage, ignoring the genuine and sincere efforts of the DPRK. Out of all the 3 points, if I clarify again, number one, it was made clear the United States should make, before too late, decisive political decision to roll back all its anachronistic and outdated hostile policies and all other related measures taken so far by the US under this policy. Number two, it was made clear that the United States should stop all the maneuvers concerning the human rights claims, which is intensified as part of the hostile policy by the US. So we have these policies, latest one, and this is in reflection of the situation on the Korean Peninsula created by US, who is deadly bent on politically eliminating the DPRK as a regime, economically stifling the DPRK, militarily annihilating the DPRK. As far as the nuclear issue and human rights are concerned, as you know, the US went ahead with taking issue of the nuclear issues. But as long as the situation developed, the issue of nuclear issue criticizing the DPRK with blackmails against our people only eventually resulted and led to the further strengthening of our nuclear deterrent. And likewise, the human rights conspiracy being conducted by US against our regime, our system, our people, will eventually lead to the further strengthening of our one-hearted unity between the leader, the party, and the people, which is the true color and picture of our society. And with regard to the statement of the March 14th, I would like to touch one specific aspect, that is the nuclear issue. It was solemnly announced in the statement, since the US was the one who first introduced nuclear weapons into South Korea and Korean Peninsula since 1950s and increased the number of nuclear weapons to over 1,000, thereby escalating nuclear blackmails against the DPRK. We do not hide the major targets of our diversified nuclear strike means is none other than the United States. Our nuclear deterrent is not subject to trading, nor is it subject to political bargaining chip. As long as the US government is in pursuit of so-called strategic operations, dreaming of the change of a DPRK, the DPRK will take and exercise high degree of patience, waiting until a man of normal and reasonable vision and idea enters into the seat of the mast into the White House. And as long as the US is continuing nuclear blackmails against the DPRK, United States should clearly know the fact that additional measures will continue to be taken by the DPRK in order to demonstrate the power of the self-defensive nuclear deterrent. I thank you. So please identify yourself, and since I'm having very limited time, I'll just a couple of questions I'll answer. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Pamela Falk from CBS News, and on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, we welcome you for being here.
Yes.
Ambassador Ri Tong-il, I would like to ask first about the most recent tests. This weekend is the fourth test this month of short-range missiles. You've said your reasoning for it, but what's the message? That there will be continued tests in defiance of the UN mandate, or that they will react to the way the United States reacts? And then can you just clarify your position on the Chung-Gang finding of the experts' report on the weapons that were found from Cuba on your vessel? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and you made a good question. And concerning, I think you asked two questions, but very tough. And concerning the first question, you're right. Recently, the DPRK strategic forces undertook routine exercise of rocket launch in our territorial waters, in our territorial land. On the other hand, as I said in my briefing, there is another development by United States. They are bringing in, as I said, I will not repeat what kind of instruments they brought in. And if you compare these two things, you can have answer. What can I answer to you? But one thing to highlight, this exercise is a routine exercise as our strategic forces planned. It was all the fired rocket through its pre-planned course landed with high precision on the exact target it planned. And throughout the process of the course of the flight, it was based on well-calculated, and it did not have any negative impact on the peace and security of the region, and also environmental effect, also 100% guaranteed. And there is one thing to highlight. There is a question of provocation. And the US said it is a provocation, but it did not say why. And it did not say what is the real meaning of provocation. But I don't think they have different perspective or concept of the meaning provocation. The real meaning of provocation is in the holding of opening gunfire of the joint military drills while we were sitting together for dialogue. And this is having negative, disastrous impact on the further progress of this dialogue, which came through with very hard, great efforts of the two sides. And one thing to further emphasize, it is purely based on the gangster-like argument of American style. They are purely saying about their own exercise, a routine, and they have no justification to point to our routine exercise of strategic forces. And concerning the mandate, it has nothing to do with the mandate. The resolution on sanctions of UN, it was manipulated by US, and we never ever recognized these resolutions. If there is anybody to raise a question, it should be the US who should be brought to the Security Council to receive sanctions, not the DPRK. And concerning Cheongcheongang incident, this is again the same answer. They are now raising this issue on the pretext of sanctions again. But again, the same answer goes, so I don't need to repeat. I thank you.
Thank you.
Please. Lady first.
Carlos Day, Global Research. I'm sorry. Carlos Day, Global Research. What do you think, since there was a very harmonious meeting of families of North and South Korea, what do you think the United States' motivation is to try and disrupt it by what are implicit military threats? And I would like to see, I would like some clarification in a historic context. I know that in 1950, when the hostilities broke out, the official story is that North Vietnam was the aggressor. But I understand that North Vietnam claims that they were the victims of aggression. Could you tell us what were the actions taken against you that led to the outbreak of hostilities in the 1950s, and who do you think was responsible for those actions?
So you're asking two questions, 1950 war and the current why. Thank you very much. First, I'll take the question of why this kind of military action by the United States at the present stage. I don't know if I'm correct in getting your question clearly.
Yeah, why would they disrupt an attempt to have more harmonious relations?
Oh, yes. Thank you. The answer is clear. There are two things occurred. One thing, as I told you, the positive move by North and South of Korea as the fellow countrymen. But this was not respected. Then there is a question why. And it has a long story, but to make it very simple. In strategic viewpoint of the United States, the US is in need of desperate need of enemy in our region. And DPRK is now enemy from the beginning of our birth as a country, 1945. And the US since then did not show any respect for our system. They purely designated as enemy, and later axis of evils, now by Kerry, country of evils. So you can imagine why. And under defense strategy of the current administration, they moved the pivot of their defense strategy from somewhere else into Asia-Pacific region. And they need military presence in this part. And there should be justification to make a presence and to continue it. And if there is a reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula, it will be deadly disastrous for their strategic interest. But the US has wrong miscalculation. The DPRK will never ever allow this policy of the US. The US is number one target is preemptive strike against the DPRK, and as I told in the briefing previously, to swallow the entire territory and to use it surrounding the other big powers in the region and making superiority in containing the advance of the big powers in the region. I thank you. And there was 150, Korean War.
Yeah.
No, the answer is clear. The Korean War was imposed by US, again for the same reason, invasion and aggression, and taking entire territory of the Korean Peninsula for their strategic interest. And you can remind it was the time when the USSR was existing, and they needed kind of containing bases against the socialist blocs. So it was a part of this political game. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Is that by you? Next to your armchair. Your armrest.
No, please. Yeah, three ladies, yes. Then, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. I wanted to ask you whether you saw any possibility of a revival of the six-party talks, any possibility of any kind of a compromise on the nuclear issue to restart the six-party talks.
Thank you, Madam. It is a good question, and as I told in the briefing, the U.S. is in pursuit of strategic patience, and they are rejecting all the dialogue. Only they are interested in increasing the tension on the Korean Peninsula, no dialogue. What they are saying, precondition for six-party talks, it is only pretext to justify their rejection of the dialogue. DPRK has been remaining open towards six-party talks without setting any preconditions. And still DPRK is open. But I don't believe and hope US will come to the table. I thank you, Madam.
KBS, report from the Korean Broadcasting. You just mentioned that if the situation continues, the North Korean government should take additional measures. So can you explain to me in detail about what is the additional measures?
I think the meaning is clear to you. The additional measures are ready, but we are keeping ourselves restrained from taking the additional measures. But it is totally depending on the attitude of the US. Then what kind of additional measures? I think you can wait and see later. Thank you.
Thanks. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for the briefing. I wanted to ask you, the U.S. has set up these trilateral meetings, I think tomorrow in The Hague, between South Korea, Japan, and itself. And also I saw last week that it was announced that DPRK might restart high-level talks with Japan. What do you think of this trilateral meeting between Abe, President Park, and the United States side? And is it true that you'll be meeting with Japan, or if so, on what topics? Thanks.
Thank you. I know you, Matthew, personally and by name. And concerning these trilateral talks, I think I'm sorry to say that you can ask to them. And concerning the question of further talks between DPRK and Japan, now humanitarian nature talks is continuing. And there is one core aspect which we regard as fundamental in our relations. The basis of our relations is depending on how to implement 2002 DPRK-Japan Joint Declaration, which was adopted in Pyongyang. The key point in this declaration is the issue of past crime liquidation. This is the key factor in improving the relations. I thank you. Yes, please.
Ambassador, in explaining the reports about human rights abuses in your country, you have blamed the United States for fabricating these things, whereas we journalists have read reports by the United Nations and other organizations that outline very serious human rights abuses, imprisonments, restrictions on religious practice, executions, political prisoners. Can you please explain the disconnect here?
Thank you. Concerning that question, I just made a little bit reference to the human rights conspiracy by the United States. So I'll add some more with reference to what the human rights conspiracy mean in my briefing. Now, the National Defense Commission on the 14th of March, as I told you, made statement, and one of the important aspects is the U.S. should immediately stop all these human rights conspiracies against the DPRK. This is a part of new hostile policy towards the DPRK, and U.S. began against the DPRK for regime change on the issue of nuclear issue first. In the process of time, the DPRK had no other choice but to go nuclear. And now we are strengthening the nuclear deterrent in the face of continuing since 1950s onwards nuclear blackmails against the DPRK. So they failed. Now they are clinging on the issue of human rights. And it did not start all of a sudden. 2004, the US Parliament adopted so-called North Korean Human Rights Act. The important aspect there by the US is to have NGOs paid by US who are involved in human rights campaign against the DPRK. NGOs of South Korea crazy about dollars of US. I just speak it straight. They went to border area of DPRK in China, and they were hell-bent on whatever means, luring, abducting Korean citizens. On the other hand, keeping some time in China secretly, they brainwashed our citizens after abduction, and they take them to South Korea. Then later they are using them as so subject to interviews after being brainwashed. And they say whatever given by Central Intelligence Agency of South Korea. And there are also criminals, as I told you in the briefing, who made crimes against the DPRK, and they ran away for life into South Korea. They are also misusing, as George Bush, the former president, was using in his visit to Seoul. So all these are totally based on manipulation of the U.S. Under this Parliament, North Korean Human Rights Act. Still, it is continuing. And if you look at the website, the press conference by one South Korean agent who was arrested in our land recently, he confessed, even at this point of time, in that border area, on the side of China, they are crazy going around with the name of missionaries or religious people, camouflaging their own real colors. And they are bringing our citizens after abduction to South Korea. It is what he made a confess. I think you are familiar with this. Thank you. I think last question. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Lee Dong-il. Ken Okasaka from Kyodo News. Just a quick follow-up with of Matthew's question between Japan and North Korea, DPRK, sorry. I understand that abduction issue is also stated on the joint statement between the two countries in Pyongyang in 2002. So I wonder if and we've seen the positive progress, such as meeting between the the daughter, of Ms. Yokota Megumi and her grandparents in Mongolia. So can I expect any further progress between in the talk between the two countries?
I think I hope there will be further progress in the issue of humanitarian nature. And as I told you again, we will be basing ourselves on the spirit of the joint declaration adopted by DPRK and Japan. So Pyongyang declaration, it will be the basis of whatever move. I thank you. I thank you. Thank you very much for your participation, and I look forward to continue.